Hi, I'm Mike Harrington, and in 2014, I embarked on a health journey resulting in my losing over 200 pounds on my own. Since then, I've been sharing my story and have become an advocate for healthy living. Welcome to Mike Inspires Me, a podcast show about health, wellness, and amazing people to inspire you to take charge of your life and your health. This week, I thought I'd talk to you about something I call the unequal yoke. We'll talk about what does it mean to be unequally yoked, what is a yoke, Y-O-K-E, and how does that apply to health? Well, let's first start talking about what a yoke is. And this is not a yolk, Y-O-L-K, as an egg yolk, but a yoke is a device that you may have seen around the necks of usually like ox on a farm, oxen, to allow them to simultaneously pull a plow. And so they've got this device called a yoke, and it's around their necks. And then in between them is like a length of like a board that's connected to a plow. Now, if one of the oxen is weaker or stronger, it may affect the ability of them to both simultaneously pull this plow straight. Okay, so you can imagine that. And either one's going to have to step it up or one's going to have to kind of step it down in order to do it. And of course, oxen, I don't know how they are, but they may not be good at adapting for one another. So that's the first idea around being unequally yoked, right? So if they're not able to pull this plow fairly equally and straight, then you might say that they're unequally yoked. Okay. Another place, and I'm sure it comes from this, is where you see it is in the Bible. And the Bible talks about having people who are not in the same belief system. So you could have one person that has no religion and the other person's religious. You could have one person, with one religion and another different religion. And because religion can be very important in households, especially amongst married couples, it can become a point of contention between the couple, because if they have different belief systems, it can affect their philosophies, their behaviors, a lot of different things. And in that case, the Bible warns against being unequally yoked with, family, friends, and whatnot, because it may pull one or other off the path. Now, in the case of the Bible, they're advocating belief in God. And then if you're around people who don't believe in God, that could become a problem for you and or the people who, of course, who don't believe. So that's the couple of places that I've seen it applied, this unequal yoke concept. And I can tell you, when I first started on my health journey, I found myself in an environment much like these oxen, or in the Bible, where I wanted to make some changes in my life, which was the first time, with my family and my spouse being with me ever, that I became sort of this healthy living, healthy conscious person. But the rest of them weren't necessarily as interested in doing these things. They had not signed up for this. Now, just because I was embarking on a health journey and looking to make significant changes in my physical behavior and food, it had the potential, and did actually, to cause issues. So as I thought about it, I said, wow, this is just like they talk about, an unequal yoke. And so it inspired me, I think back in 2016, to write an article Now, back then, I tongue in cheek said, the unequal yoke. My spouse is sabotaging my diet, right? Which she wasn't intentionally, but let's talk about some of those things, my experiences, and what I had to do, because this is something I have had people ask me about, and even recently something like this. But I had a close person in my life who came to me and said that, they couldn't make changes to what groceries they were buying in the home because it would upset their spouse. And I was like, wow. I said, even if you're just working it on, just for yourself. And they said, well, no, this person wants me to eat like them and wants, and I said, yeah, but your health stuff is your business. Now, certainly they're welcome to join you, but it was an issue. It was an issue for this person to be able to step forward because they did not really know what to do in order to move forward with making some changes in their health and not disrupt what their partner wanted, which was, sounding like they didn't want to make these changes. Well, that was exactly what I was facing too, except for the fact that Terry, my wife, and wasn't trying to prevent me. She didn't so much have a desire for me to eat exactly like her. In fact, she wanted me to get healthy, but she didn't really have an interest in doing this for herself at the time. Okay, she was happy with her health and her weight, and didn't see the need to make the changes with the things. Now, Terry eats, I'm going to say a fairly regular American diet. She eats healthy foods, and she also likes her chips and cookies and things. I mean, so do I. But for me, I had to make some changes. And, the other changes that I had to make weren't quite as directly impacting her or say my family, but it was around time for me to exercise. Now, today, as you know, I hike quite a bit, and that takes me away from being home. Now, fortunately, at the time, my children were mostly grown up. I think I just had a teenager in the house at the time, so didn't need as much time. In fact, sometimes my teenager came with me hiking. So that probably wasn't as a big of an impact, but it can be for people. I've had people tell me that, well, I don't have the time to exercise with my kids and this and that. And, there's, as you heard me mention a minute ago, there's creative ways like, getting the kids to come along with you. In fact, that's one of the things I love seeing is families getting out and hiking and sort of leaving a legacy of health for their family. But in my case, I think the bigger impact could have been food, although I can talk about some of the other ripple effects that it had. But first with food. So I initially, when I first started making changes to what I ate, it was something that I had to kind of do on my own. Because I couldn't expect the rest of my family. There were times we did eat some of the meals I was making, but sometimes I was eating either lower calorie and or more vegetables. And so I had to get creative, but this was a conversation that I had to have with my family, with my spouse, that, hey, some days I may not want to eat what you're eating, and it's nothing against you or what you're eating. It's just that for me, I need to make some changes in order to lose this weight. And, Terry, my wife, certainly understood. And so that was fine. And so sometimes, if she was eating, I don't know, a fried whatever meal, fried fish, maybe I did one of the following. I may say to her, hey, while you're frying fish, could you take a couple of pieces of those and just bake them in the oven, or give me a couple of pieces and I'll bake them in the oven? And so, I'm kind of moving more into the solutions here, but I tried to negotiate with her, and she was more than happy to accommodate me, so that she could still enjoy her part and we could still enjoy the meals. There were times that she may have had the fried fish, and or maybe we bought it or something, and I had something else entirely, and that was okay with her too. And fortunately, unlike my close family member or close person in my life who came to me about a similar thing, my partner, my spouse, was not as concerned about me eating exactly like she did. But here's where it gets complicated, and you hear me say this often. So I never stopped liking cookies. I still love cookies. Oh my goodness, cookies, cake, ice cream, all those things that taste so, so delicious, but aren't so great for managing your weight and, of course, your health. And Terry loves those things too. And Terry doesn't really have as much of a health and or weight concern. And so she still kept continuing to buy those things. And you've heard me talk many, many times about sneaking or getting into her food or eating it up on her when I have those binge moments. It could at times cause problems. And you might say, well, why didn't you just buy those things? Well, I didn't really want to eat them. I'm laughing because it's like I sound like I have no control over myself. And that's probably a whole other subject we could talk about another time. Is it lack of willpower or control? There's some people who don't necessarily agree with that it's hard when you have an addiction for things. I mean, it's, I'm sitting and trying to eat healthy and eat an apple, and I'm looking over and, my family's eating chocolate chip cookies. It's not the same thing. And don't get me wrong, I like my apple. It's a delicious apple. It's good for me. It makes me feel good. The cookie just is not the same. It's not the same crunch. It's not the same anything. And it was hard. I will be honest with you. So what did I do for those things? Well, sometimes I had the cookie, but I couldn't have it as often as my family because, we know I put on weight very, very easily. And I also have sometimes, so I will call it self-control, but overindulgence in certain things too. So I had to kind of learn some in between, because the other piece of it that became apparent over time, because there were times where my family, my wife would try to make something for me and I start asking her questions. What's in this? Did you put oil in it? How much sugar is in this? And unfortunately, sometimes felt like I was grilling her about it, attacking her. Well, how much this, how much that? And I wasn't doing it so much to harass her. It was more about, I needed to know what was going in, especially when I was tracking it at the time, because I needed to know how many calories and the content, the nutritional content of the food, as I was learning about those things. I have since moved away from a lot of that stuff. I don't really track anymore, just because it's just a lot of work, and I've got a better in my head mind around what my healthy balance is. But back in those early days, it was tough. It was really, really tough. But we had to find a way so we wouldn't be bumping heads. And that really came down to, you're going to hear me clicking here. I'm going to look at some notes that I took on this here. But it came down to negotiation, okay? There were times, because food is food. And so the quote, my air quotes here, healthy food that I was eating is still food. And there was no reason that Terry or the rest of my family couldn't eat those things too. If I'm making, I don't know, let's just think here, a vegetarian chili, lower calorie, not as much meat and fat in it, making a vegetarian chili, right? Certainly they enjoyed eating that, and we could make it, doctor it up, or maybe if they want to add a little extra to it, they can add their sour cream and or cheese to it that they may like. But we tried to do a lot of those type of things too, so that, number one, to help with their health, because certainly it's a good thing to influence your family on their healthy diet, because as I said, Terry and the rest of my family ate a pretty regular American diet, and for those of you who know, I'm sure you all do, that's not the greatest diet. And I hate using the word diet, but not the best way to eat. The American diet's very high in low in fiber, high in processed foods, high in fats, high in carbohydrates, and we're talking about low quality carbohydrates, and that's typical in our diets. It tastes great, but so the other side of it is, besides negotiation, is having an influence on my family. So we negotiate, and we still negotiate, my wife and I, when we talk about things. Now, Terry of late has gotten a lot more health conscious over the past few years. Thank you, God, that she is, because she's had her own health concerns, wanting to lose. She put on the dreaded COVID 15 or whatever, and I don't think she put on 15 pounds. But the point is, she's gotten concerned. And the other thing is, for those of you who follow my hiking, she's been getting out and hiking with me more, and walking and hiking and exercising. So the good thing is, there is this negotiation on the other side, where I really tried hard, being honest here, to not push my. I mean, you can see how this has happened with religion, right? One or the other wants to save the other person. If you're a Christian, you want to save your partner. You don't want them to go to hell, right? You want them to. And the same thing with me, as I saw Terry, eating certain things, eating an entire bag of chips. Sorry, Terry. Eating an entire can of fries. Listen, I can't judge her, because I didn't get up to 450 pounds by being a good boy either. But I was worried about her health, and you guys heard her mentioned, and she doesn't mind me mentioning, she's had some concerns too, with high blood pressure and whatnot. And so I did want to influence her a little bit, but I didn't want to push it. Okay. And but there were times it did get frustrating, or I did get tired of, being so perfect. And so that's the other piece. Okay. The last piece in this, that a lot of people don't talk about this, is balance. Albeit it's very important to have a healthy lifestyle. Okay. But I don't think people quite grasp some of these other nuances about what being healthy means, because being healthy doesn't mean eating perfectly and exercising all the time. Those things are good to a degree, but your happiness is very important too. And socialization with friends and family. Now, what does that have to do with any of this? Well, I'll tell you. And we'll get into the happiness part too. There were times that I would be invited to functions that I knew were primarily food-based. And sorry for any of those who may have invited me back then, and I didn't come, because I knew that I would have a hard time controlling myself and making good choices around these temptations. I'm already living in it, and then here I'm at this free-for-all, and it's like, well, Mike, what's wrong with you? Why can't you control yourself? It's hard, okay? And for any of you who have an addiction, you get it, right? If you alcohol problem and you can't hang around bars and people drinking, or maybe you can, and bless you if you can. For me, food is a tough one. And but you know what it did for me? So it's the balance. I finally got to the point, because I'm healthy enough. It's important to have socialization. It's important to be happy. And if cutting out a certain segment of my social life is making me unhappy, well, I got to take a look at that, because health and happiness aren't always something that's quite apparent. And sometimes going to a potluck event and eating whatever I want within reason is part of my health. Because overall, at the end of the day, and I'll keep saying it over and over, my health and happiness lie somewhere between broccoli and cookies. Hopefully a little more on the broccoli side, but you get my point. Okay? I really emphasize, if you're in a situation where you're finding it difficult to manage with your partner, spouse, family, whoever you got to deal with. And I had this happen recently. Somebody asked me about one of their best friends. Said, I don't know if I can hang around this guy anymore because of the way he eats. And I said, well, have a conversation. And that's really where it starts. And say, look, I care for you, but I need to make some changes. And that Friday night, all you can eat fried fish thing we do every week, I don't know I can do that anymore. Or maybe I only do, or maybe you negotiate. You know what? I'll do it with you, but maybe once a month. Because at the end of the day, you are the one responsible for your own health, not your friends, not your family. We look out for each other. We care for each other. And if your friend is truly your friend, if your wife is truly your wife, and your husband, your partner is truly cares about you, they will care about your health. And your health is a personal thing. You've got to be responsible for taking care of it, and you have to make the changes. And if your family is not able or willing to do it, then you got to take your own responsibility for yourself. There will be challenges. And in the end, one can always hope for influencing the health habits of others will help your entire family. At the same time, having balance, not being an obsessive health nut, also helps with the bigger picture of health and happiness. I hope you enjoyed this segment. I hope you find it useful. Any questions you have for me, you can reach me at mike@mikeinspiresme.com. Stay awesome and stay healthy. Hey friends, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Mike Inspires Me podcast. Stay tuned for future episodes and check out some of the past ones you may have missed. For more information on me and my story, go to mikeinspiresme.com. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Mike Harrington Official and on Twitter at Mike Inspires Me. Stay healthy and stay awesome.